if you're tuning into this. And as you probably know, I've been developing an ongoing vlog series called Conversations with Creatives. I'm a big believer that the variable for success is always the creative. Today I'm with my good friend, coach, and mentor, Marc Montoya. And some people may not brand him as a creative, but if you own a business, you definitely have to get creative at multiple points and times in your life. So I'm gonna let Marc introduce himself, tell you a little bit about where he's been, what he's doing, and just all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, awesome. It's great to see you, Bjj. It's been a real pleasure getting an opportunity to coach, you, and we met back in the day and had some run-ins when you and Chris Camozzi had been introduced as fighters and friends. So it's always been fun to be around you. We've always had a blast out and about and in training and in fights, whether it's win or lose. So that's always been fun.
Definitely.
But yeah, as Brian mentioned, I'm Marc Montoya. I am the head coach and owner of Factory X here in Inglewood, Colorado. We've been just extremely blessed with a lot of growth and success here at Factory X. Bjj came to us years ago from Ohio, came from a really good, solid gym and camp, and he's been one of the trailblazers for us in the sense of just what we've done here and the growth that we've made. When Bjj was here, we probably had 20-some fighters. Now, we have upwards of 50, and so the growth has been exponential. And like I said earlier, it's just been a lot of fun to be blessed with the success and the hard work from you guys, but also from myself and the other coaches and coaching staff here. So it's been a hell of a ride, and we're just kind of getting started.
Yeah. It's funny, I think, obviously sometimes we get the text, sometimes we get the call, and you're pinging all over the place. Generally, I'll call Marc last minute, and I'm like, hey, can we meet Thursday? And he's like, I'm on a plane to somewhere. But obviously that doesn't happen overnight. Obviously you're blessed to coach a lot of UFC, Bellator, Glory, and a million other fighters and fighting organizations kind of across the world. But tell me a little bit about kind of the origins and how this all kind of started.
Yeah, we started in a tiny little shoebox, essentially in a strip mall, and like some gyms do. Some gyms take a different approach. They find a financial backer and they start in a spot like this. But for us and for me and for my vision, I always wanted to grow organically. That was my goal from the start, and it still is my goal. Culture has always been the number one thing when it comes to the success of this place. And me starting a culture that I wanted to be around daily, and then, telling you guys as fighters and as students that, hey, here's the culture that we want to have. Let's carry that on. As long as you buy into that, then it allows us to then grow and be successful. So if you guys didn't buy into the culture, if you guys didn't buy into my vision, I wouldn't have the opportunity to train multiple UFC fighters on a daily basis, on a weekly, annual basis. We've had the ability to train all fighting athletes through almost every organization. I don't think there's an organization that we haven't trained fighters, whether it's Bellator, PFL, ONE, whatever. So, I've been super blessed, but ultimately it's been because of you guys. I started the vision and you guys have carried it on. And man, it's been really cool to see. We've expanded 4 times in the sense of our space, and we're getting ready to expand one more time here soon, hopefully here at the beginning of the year, because we're just out of space again. So that stuff is cool, and not only am I a coach, but being a business owner, it's a tough challenge. It's a tough challenge. When I started, I was working a full-time job, working 60+ hours a week, training you guys at night late. I wouldn't get home till 11 o'clock at night, p.m. And then I would get about 4 hours of sleep and I'd start my day again. I did that for 4 years. So, the start was humble beginnings, and it still is though. One of my monikers is to stay humble and hungry. And I try to do that and lead from the front that way. And I ask you guys to do that. So yeah, it's been really cool, and I'm glad you've been able to be part of that ride.
Oh, thank you. It's been a blessing, and I appreciate that. Definitely. One of the things that was always super attractive to this program and to you was the systems and the processes. As much as you say developing a culture, that's kind of a loose term. I really feel like you've done a great job of building systems and processes and having even, raw fighters with talent that you've empowered to be, lower level assistant coaches that have then, come up and coached right beside you at the UFC and the higher level. Tell me a little bit about, once again, you mentioned no investors, no fundraisers, certainly, no fundraising. You're certainly not hiring coaches and paying them, whatever they want a year. Yeah. So tell me a little bit about just how you kind of built the initial staff and some of those initial systems and processes and things of that nature.
Yeah, it's a good point. People laugh that know me real well when you say I'm a system guy. They're like, yeah, no shit, because that's really who I am, just as a person. I build systems and try to then, like you said, create a process within the system. The biggest thing for me was I've been doing this for 20 years as a fighter and a coach, and I've seen successes and I've seen places that weren't successful. So I've tried to learn from both. I feel it's imperative that I remain a student every single day, even to this point and moving forward. If I don't continue to learn, how are we going to grow as a collective group? So when it comes to how I was going to build this, I learned early that to bring in outside people, that has to be a real special fit. To grow people organically is going to be the best way, but man, the challenges of doing that, because the immediate success doesn't happen.
Yeah.
It's a real long process to organically groom coaches. One of the things that I've really prided myself on is that I've spent as much time with grooming coaches as I have grooming athletes. And twofold. Why? Because one, as my job continues to grow and expand beyond what it's ever been, I need coaches to be here. You mentioned travel. My daily, weekly workload looks like this. I'm here Monday through Wednesday in Factory X, and then I'm on the road, Thursday through Sunday. And for a minute, I was like, man, is that really my job? And then I accepted it. To be honest with you, I kind of only accepted it about 2 weeks ago. I was like, my job is to be the general in battle every weekend and come back to the troops and say, hey, here's where we're at, here's what we're doing. Let's train Monday through Wednesday under me, and then let's let the other coaches handle the job while I'm gone so that I can go back into the battle with all of you warriors, And so, but I barely came to grips with that a couple of weeks ago, and I've been doing, Factory X is almost 9 years old. So I did, though, have the foresight with saying, okay, I want growth, because my goal with Factory X has never been to have multiple locations. Right. My goal has always been to grow one space and continually expand it and grow it and have more staff under one roof so that I could remain and have that culture. That doesn't mean that in the future we couldn't have other locations, but at the present moment, my goals remain the same, and that's to continue to grow. So I've always looked at growth and been planning for it, and this is part of the reason why I've worked as hard on the coaching aspect and helping groom coaches as I have with grooming and coaching athletes is that side of it. It's been good that I did that too, because my new role wouldn't be happening, and we wouldn't have the same success if I didn't do that.
That foundation and that support system, I think, super crucial. Speaking of training schedule and your travel schedule, that's kind of a double-headed monster to go back and forth. And I've noticed over the years that sometimes certain things shift and switch positions based on day, probably because of your travel schedule or just trying to improve performance. Yeah. So tell me a little bit about the guys' training schedule now, kind of what that looks like week to week, and then how your schedule kind of balances in between that and all the extra stuff that you do that necessarily the other fighters aren't a part of, but you're still engaged with during the week.
Sure. The schedule, you're talking about the schedule, this and how these guys train and how I stay in the mix and continue to coach and travel. The biggest thing is that I had to look at the schedule and say, okay, in order for our athletes to be the best athletes in the world, what are we going to do? And so, for a while, to train 5:30 to 7 p.m. was considered a full-time fighter. You came Monday through Friday and you did that, and you came and did like kind of move around session on Saturday, and that was a full-time fighter. The competition, though, has asked for another schedule. Competition has said, actually, the 5:30 to 7 guy is the part-time fighter. The full-time fighter is doing multiple sessions, multiple days. And it doesn't mean that they're in here killing themselves every single session, but the point is that the learning is going on multiple times a day. To do it just once, based on what I see our competition is demanding, is not going to get it done when it comes to the world level, at the highest level. So when I looked at it, I was like, okay, in order to do that, less is more probably. And so one of the things I did, and a lot of people thought, what the heck are you doing, is I said to my athletes, okay, on Wednesdays, you're going to get midweek completely off. But if you're coming 5:30 to 7, that Wednesday's not off because you're part-time. Right. But if you're training full-time, that Wednesday is completely off, man. That's a rest and recover day. And then you also have Sunday that's completely off, right? So those 2 days, they give the athletes the full day ability to rest and recover. So that's one thing that I implemented. The other thing is how these guys are training, in the sense of whether they're doing just an individual art training, or they're doing a mixed blend, or they're sparring, right? And so sparring is something that when I came up, we used to do almost daily, and I learned that that's probably not the best thing to do. Right. And so learning from my mistakes, obviously, the Factory X team only spars once a week, and that's been a big taper too, in the sense of what I came up doing. So the other thing is, these guys and girls are coming in here and blending mixed martial arts. So for a while, we used to train individual arts, individual arts, individual arts, individual arts. The fighters that are training full-time, meaning they're getting in morning sessions and they're getting in more one-on-one sessions, those fighters have an amazing amount of blend when it comes to mixed martial arts. So they're blending all of the arts together. And the part-time fighters are building foundational skills per art. That's what's happening. And so if you really want to go and take it to the next level, take it past, the local regional sector, you've got to jump in both feet and go and do this thing full time. And man, the sacrifice of which to do that, as you know, is incredible. Because financially, the cash flow in MMA at the beginning, even at the highest level, you're still working another job. And so I respect the hell out of you guys for that, because I know what that feels like. I know that when I was fighting, there was no money. And I never got paid anything. And so I did it purely out of just the love and joy that of this martial arts. But you guys having to balance that, I've felt that before as a person too. So I have empathy, kind of, but empathy and my name don't really mix a lot. So you can ask any of my athletes, right? So, but I do understand, I should say. I understand it because I've done it personally. I've asked you guys to do it personally. And those of you that have bought in and done it full time and jumped both feet in, you've really shown success, whether you went on to win a world title or not. The point is that you've gone out there, and when you got in the cage, you knew that you were ready, mentally and physically. And that's the most important thing to me.
Mm-hmm. I 100% agree with that. I've always been a person who believe that when it comes to goal setting, we often focus on the outcome goals. Yep. But to me, to get your outcome goal, it really goes process, performance, outcome. Yep. So, the goal is to be a world champ. Let's look at our process, and that might start with something simple as like eating better and having a better nutrition plan, or strength and conditioning that just guys don't think about. But when you do that stuff, it increases the performance, thus leads to the outcome. You've always been good at kind of lining that stuff up in everything I've ever seen. Can you go back, can you think of anything that you look back from a process perspective, like back in the day and you're like, what was I thinking on that? Or like trials, experiments, anything like that that sticks out to you?
Yeah, there's a lot of that actually. I look back and I go, what the hell was I thinking I was going to do this full time, right? Sometimes I'm like, wow, if I knew what all this entailed at the beginning, would I really still do this? And the answer is yes, actually. But yeah, there's some whack stuff that I've done in the sense of trying to train these guys. For example, what's that?
It seemed right at the time.
Yeah, it seemed right. So for example, when CrossFit wasn't like it is now, and it was kind of a garage thing. I went and did CrossFit, and I was like, hey man, that's a pretty intense workout. Right. Chasing fatigue rather than performance, essentially. I didn't know that at the time though. Yeah. So I went out and did CrossFit and was like, man, I could see how this could complement what we're doing in MMA. Right. At least in my head, that's what I thought. Yeah. So I teamed up, and nothing against CrossFit, but the issue, because there is a lot of benefits there, but when you're taxing your system anaerobically like we do every day on the mat, and then you're doing that additionally 2 to 3 times a week in strength and conditioning, which is supposed to just complement this, right. It wasn't helping. It wasn't working, and I barely wanted to get on the mat, much less you guys, right? So that's one example that I was like, man, there's got to be a better way to do this. And so of course we nixed that and got rid of that. Again, I have no issues with CrossFit at all. It's just when you're an MMA athlete and what we're trying to accomplish, it just didn't seem to be the right fit. And I did that via trial and error because I was doing it too. Right. I was getting on the mat, I was doing this CrossFit, and then I was doing it as well. And there were days when I was like, man, I am tapped out. I can't do this anymore. And I was making them push because I was pushing, but whether that was right or wrong, we had some success from that, but I just felt like at the end of the day, that's not the right approach. So that's one example of doing some of that, right? And I don't know, mixed martial arts, in my opinion, in general, is trial and error. I mean, that's how this all happened, right? Right.
Think about the old days. I was going to ask you, is there anything from like the olden days that you look back like, man, like that everyone was doing nationally that we kind of look back now and we're like, that's a bad idea, or you yourself specific?
Well, I just brought up sparring. Yeah. You know, we didn't know really. I didn't have a coach like me who was like, hey, here's the system, here's the process, here's the days off, here's when you should and shouldn't run, here's where you should taper, here's where your strength conditioning should be. I didn't have anyone like that really. We just got in there and we said, okay, I guess we're sparring today. And we'd be like, yeah, and then every day we just kind of sparred, you know. And not that I didn't learn technique and stuff. I mean, there was that, but the sparring was constant and consistent. And that's one thing I learned over time, that we can't be doing that, especially if I want to remember my name at 50, right? So yeah, stuff like that was insane. Weight cutting is another thing that was absolutely just ridiculous. Yeah. I didn't know how to cut weight to save my life, you know. I worked it all off. I was in trash bags or sweatsuits and you know, sweatpants, and would spit in a cup and would do all this nonsense, kind of like this witchcraft stuff that made no sense, you know. But it did work. Right. But man, it felt like shit when I do it. I don't know how we ever performed after doing that stuff, but the weight cut stuff was just garbage. We've come a long, long, long way with adding science and real nutrition into how we approach that now. So these guys are real fortunate when it comes to guys like you, guys before even me, that have trailblazed through this and showed us what not to do. You know? Right. I know that you had a real systematic approach to cutting weight when you were using Lockhart's system, but I know that you didn't have that for your whole career.
No. It was, once again, trial and error. It was like, I'm dying.
Yeah, exactly.
Let me find some help.
Yeah, exactly. So, and I think that's the biggest thing, like I said earlier, is just consistently wanting to learn. You know, you have to want to be a student because this thing changes so often. And man, mixed martial arts seems like it changes hourly, you know, and so those bad or things that we did that we thought were okay in the past, if we don't learn from that and move forward, man, we get left behind, that's for sure. And so I take a lot of pride in knowing that I've really tried to stay on the forefront of that wave and stay in front of it, not get behind it.
Absolutely. Yeah. Speaking of that, obviously it's the fourth quarter, it's December, 2019 is around the corner. I know you're not a guy that really look back on past accomplishments and things like that. So what are you excited for into 2019 as a coach, or like new things that you're working on or trying, or just anything like that in general?
Yeah, you know, I'm kind of a whiteboard guy, just in general, my personality. Like if I get a big whiteboard like the size of that wall, man, I'm in heaven, because then I can start doing like the matrix stuff and changing all how it looks. I actually had a little time the week of Thanksgiving and I bought a new whiteboard, which has surprised nobody. And I was at home, on the whiteboard and just mapping out stuff for, the first quarter and then obviously the entire 2019 coming up. And so when I look at where we're at, some of it's just change. Some of it has to be adaptation and change. So I like making you guys a little bit uncomfortable. I like the fact that right now what Monday and Tuesday look like. I like the fact that next year I'm going to change that a little bit, and you're like, oh man, Tuesday's not that anymore,
right.
And we're going to do something a little bit different, for example. I like that.
I think it's micro macro too, because it happens that in the fights.
Yep.
So if you can't handle it in the process and the training,
exactly,
quarterly, weekly, systematically, how are you going to respond to that change under pressure during the fight?
Exactly. And I've said this many times, but you guys are the best in the world at recognizing pattern, and you have to be. So do I as a coach. I have to be the best in the world at recognizing pattern, not allowing you guys to create pattern, but see pattern, gain intel, and do that. So I look at 2018, and we're having a phenomenal year overall. Last year we had a great year. We were 70-23 last year, and this year we're going to be right around the same. It's just the level of fights have been elevated this year. So when I look at 2019, it's about what kind of pattern have we created in 2018, and how do I recognize that and not allow us to continue to show that same pattern. And so when I look at the blanket approach of training in 2019, that's been my biggest look, is where are we at pattern-wise? And so there's a few changes coming up because of some of the fights that I've seen, even on wins, that I'm like, man, we need to change some of that. Right. If this would have happened, we potentially don't win that fight. Right. And so there's some things that I've looked at systematically that I've said, okay, we need to change, build a different process. Still training MMA, of course, but we need a different look at this. And so that's what my approach is coming up here in 2019. And like I told the team the other day, I said, you guys are trying to learn 50 years of martial arts in a 10-year time period, because that's about the lifespan of an MMA fighter. There's a little shorter, a little longer for some people, but that average is about 10 years. What does that mean? Well, that means not only from my perspective, but your perspective as athletes, you guys have to be dialed in like you've never been dialed in before. And those that figure that out in that short time period of 10 years, those are the people that essentially go out and change their life. And so not only financially, but platform-wise, and accomplish goals that they've set and eventually accomplish. So same thing goes for 2019, right? My approach when it comes to the coaching aspect is exactly that, is how do we stuff all this information into a 1-year time period for you guys, because I know that your time window in fighting is so short in comparison to life. So that's the secondary approach when I look at all this, is what does the schedule look like? So that's kind of my thought today.
That makes total sense. And anybody digs into your details and looks at your body of work and your resume, that philosophy, what you're speaking to now is ever present and changing and shifting. So it's definitely a commendament to what you've built and the person, the coach you are.
Thank you, man.
Really appreciate the time. I'm pretty sure you just flew in from somewhere.
I did actually. I just got back from lovely Thackerville, Oklahoma.
It's great there.
It's a great spot.
It's a great town. You guys should.
You guys should go. You should go check it out.
Thackerville,
Amazing.
Oklahoma. What's the casino name?
WinStar Casino is the only thing ever in Thackerville. Yeah. So, but
just outside of Dallas, give or take an hour.
An hour and a half drive. Yeah. It feels kind of like home though, since Joe's fought there like 1 billion times. Yeah. So, I know you've been there before. Yep. It's a heck of a deal, but yeah, I'm getting ready to go on the road again. Of course, every weekend here in December. I'm traveling.
Merry Christmas.
Then, thank you. And the day after Christmas, I'm getting on a plane. So at least I'm home for Christmas. That's nice. And I was home for Thanksgiving, which is
2 for 2.
I haven't done that in a couple years. So
my
wife would have killed me if I wouldn't have been. But anyway, my wife did inform me. She said, do you realize that there's a UFC every weekend from January till March? I said, every weekend?
Yeah.
She goes, yeah. She's like, well, I'll see you in April maybe.
Right,
yeah.
right.
I was like, man, that's craziness. So, but anyway, yeah, thank you, man.
Gift and a curse, definitely.
Yeah, I appreciate your time. He's doing a phenomenal job, so if you're following him, keep doing it. He comes up with creative ways to show and inspire you guys, and I know he's been a hell of an athlete for me to coach, so you guys are in great hands with Mr. Brian Rogers. I don't ever call him that, I call him B-Raj, so
Serious.
tell B-Raj when you see him, what's up, B-Raj? Maybe one day he'll put that Predator mask on for you and parade around the streets there for you. But thanks again, bro. It's great to see you.
Appreciate it. Thank you very much. Thank you.